All right, thank you so much for coming. Tonight is my father's yard site. So I would like to dedicate the class. Leila Nishmaso, Natalie Tzvi Huda, Ben Minshafega. Have Aliyah for his neshama, and this class should be part of the Aliyah. So thank you everyone for joining. We Good night, Vera. Good night, Vera. We are in chapter 21. I wrote chapter 20 and I'm like, no, that's a mistake. We're in chapter 21. We're actually towards the end of chapter 21. So what are we discussing in chapter 21? We are wanting to absorb a very counterintuitive concept that all is Hashem, that there's nothing but Hashem. If all is Hashem and there's nothing but Hashem, then that means that all of creation didn't change him at all. And we want to really, really, really internalize this. And it's really difficult because the world seems to cry out, I exist. And we're saying, no, not really. So the Rebbe is trying in a very methodical, intellectual way for us to absorb a very non-rational concept. So we began in chapter 20 by saying all of creation does not impact the creator because creation is only words and words do not change the speaker. That's what we said in chapter 20. In chapter 21, we developed this further and we said that all of creation as speech is a different type of speech than our speech. Because in our speech, we speak the words and they leave us. They have a life of their own. But by God, he is always so one with his speech that we said that Hashem, that God, is as one with his speech after he says it as we are before we even think it. When it's still in my subconscious, when it's still in my primordial thoughts or feelings, that's how one God is with his speech, meaning us, meaning creation, as we are before we even think the words. That oneness. Which led us to really understand then creation as speech having no existence outside of Hashem's existence, outside of God's existence. Meaning in chapter 20, we were saying, well, it's words and words don't impact you. And now we're saying, well, it's words and those words are you. And since those words are still you, there's no difference for you. And we said this chapter we could really view as directed toward creations of godliness. Because even creations of godliness can make this mistake and could feel, well, I'm godliness and God formed me and I'm God's speech. But right now I'm speech that's emerged from God. And the Rebbe says there's no such thing by him. Nothing ever emerges from him. It's still within him, even as it emerged from him. You're still one. You're still connected. You're still no identity outside of God's identity. And that's a lifetime of work. Very valuable work, very calming, reassuring work, and really the work all of us do all day long. When we just say, it's all God, there's nothing but God, and therefore it's okay. Any questions on this before we move forward? Okay, so let's continue. We're on page Chaf Zayin, which is the second page of chapter 21. Just remember exactly what we're up to. Okay, I'm looking at all these things I know we discussed. Okay. So we're about 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 lines from the top of the page. So we're towards the very end of the chapter. So what we were saying very directly before these words were up to understand these words is that God, as he's speaking, it's really a process, as we explained. Speech is a revelation of self to something else. We said that something else is creation. But if God just exposed himself to creation, creation would cease to exist. Creation can't handle God in such intensity. Just as even in a very, very minor form of this, when God spoke the 10 commandments, our souls left our bodies. Couldn't handle it. If God would reveal himself, nothing would be. So therefore, God has this deep desire. I learned this recently, I guess, maybe in connection with Surfside, and even more like was very poignant thought, that God has an essence desire for a home. That's what this world is. God's wannabe home. Mashiach is when it actually functions. And because God's essence desires for a home, every human has an essence desire to have a home. It's part of how we're wired. We need a home because God needs a home. And God wanting a home began creation. And what God did every step of creation is make himself smaller and smaller and smaller. And last week we read some details of squeezing it out and covering it over and turning inward and again and again and again and again and again, millions of times to get so small that he could create an existence that would exist, that would tolerate the godliness in it because it's so small and wouldn't cease to exist. The essence miracle of Mashiach, the redemption, is that God's going to be completely exposed and we're going to completely handle it. That is the essence miracle of the times of redemption. And that miracle is created by all of our work now. Because as we study God's work, as we study God's Torah, we are strengthening and shifting the fabric of creation that it can somehow do the impossible and handle him. But initially, God made himself smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller so we could exist. And continuing that thought, the Rebbe says, some 14 lines from the top of the page. I didn't know I lost it. V'lachein, and therefore, Gam came, nidme lehem or v'chayis hadibur shamakom baruch hu. It appears to creation because God did this to himself, because he so much squashed himself. Because if he didn't completely squash himself, we would not exist. We would cease to exist in the face of God's energy. So because he made himself so small, it appears to us. Now again, us here doesn't mean forces of evil. It means an angel. It means godliness. It appears that the light and vitality of the speech of God, hamalubash bahem, that's engarbed in them, and they are aware of that energy, and they are cognizant of it, and they know that's their life. Ki'ilu, this is the crux, as if hu davar muvdal mimahuso vatzmuso yisparech, separate from God's being. Again, I'm going to say this again because it's a very significant concept in understanding the logic here. God wants us. He wants creation. He actually literally wants us. He wants creation because he wants us. He wants a Jew to do a mitzvah. He wants a Jew to serve him. That's why he wants all of this. The whole Milky Way exists, so there should be a planet Earth, so there should be a Jew. Learning Tanya tonight. That's why it all exists. So in order for there to be a Milky Way and a planet Earth and a Jew and a Tanya and the ability to study it, God had to make himself really small. Because if he wasn't that small, none of it would exist. It would all be disintegrated in the presence of God's energy. It would be like such a powerful light. It would blind us out of existence. So God made himself very small. The downside, if you will, but it's not a downside, it's part of the process of our work, but I'm going to call it downside just for this concept. The downside is, if he made himself that small, I believe that's all he is. I'm trying to think of a metaphor in my head for it. It'd be as if, I don't know, as if a parent is coloring with a child, and to make it user friendly for the child, they're just coloring very, very similar to how the child colors. So they and the child are coloring together, and it's so nice and warm, as versus if the parent makes this massive, beautiful thing and the kid's like, whoa, this isn't about me, this is about you. So the parent's really very focused on the child and makes it very user friendly for the child, which is great, great, great. But then when the kid looks at what the other parents do, they're like, oh, my mother doesn't really know how to color. She always goes out of the lines. She doesn't know how to do it any better. So I don't know if that's a good metaphor for the concept, but the idea being, God made himself so small that we think that's how big he is. He made himself so small because otherwise we would cease to exist. But he didn't change his vastness by interacting with us in a way of smallness. Again, taking my very poor parable metaphor for it, the fact that the mother is drawing out of the lines doesn't mean she doesn't know how to draw within the lines. She's just right now making it something that works for her child. God's vastness wasn't tampered with because he's taking the expression of his energy and making it small enough for us to exist. But we look at it and we think, so to speak, that's how small he is. So the creation, and we're talking about godly creation, the recipients of this energy think, oh yeah, God made himself small enough that the energy came from him and left him to become us. And the Alter Rebbe says, God is unchanging. From my perspective, he's small, so I can exist, but he's not really in any way changed. So all there ever was is him. Well, now he made himself really small, so there's also room for us. All there is him. From your perspective, he made himself small. From your perspective, there's room for you. From his perspective, he's as big as he ever was. He didn't give up on any parts of himself. He didn't take any parts of himself and self-destruct. So just as all there ever was is him, all there ever is him. All there ever will be is him. So what are you? Him, in a different form. That's the mistake. And this is the reason for the mistake. God making himself so small leads me to naturally make the mistake. And the mistake in one word means separation. Creations of godliness know they're completely created by God. No, they're entirely vivified by God's energy. Their subtle mistake is they are currently separate, though completely vivified by his energy. Nothing separate. That's your mistake. Now, I said the non-downside. Why is this not a downside? Because what really it's doing is giving us the opportunity to work. In other words, if I'm with God's system, I think I exist. I think I exist separate from God. No, I'm created by God and my whole life is God and my whole energy is God, but I also exist. He made me. You're part of him. And that's the challenge of our existence. To feel intuitively separate and to go deeper and understand that I'm part of God's existence, as is everything. That's the challenge and that's the purpose. Any questions on any of this? I know it's a lot of deep stuff and I hope I'm saying it clearly enough. Any questions on any of this?
I wanted to ask, if we specially consider ourselves the only child of Hashem, but it's like it's probably the only relationship that you could be, except if you're in utero, that you could be part of somebody, but you're their only child outside.
That's a great muscle. That's a wonderful way of expressing it. I really like that. We can envision, if everyone heard what Sarah said, if you can envision the fetus inside the womb, it's clearly a separate life. It's clearly absolutely one with the life of the mother and cannot be severed. It's separate. It's one. It's both. That's a beautiful, beautiful metaphor. Perfect. Wow. Nobody ever exactly expressed it that way, Sarah. That's a really great way of thinking of it. No, it really is. I mean it. It's really good because that's it just really is really good metaphor for it. It's an entity, but it can't. You couldn't sever it from his mother. God forbid. But it is. But it isn't. That's the essence mystery of creation. Very, very well put. Anyone else? Okay, so let's look at a little more inside. Not only, again, going back to the mistake of godly creations, their misunderstanding of the situation. So they believe that they're currently separate because God spoke them into existence, and your words leave you and have a life of their own, though they're your words. But only we emerged from him. We don't think we're anything besides God matter. There is nothing besides God matter, but we're God matter that emerged. Like speech. In other words, what the Rebbe is saying is, but just one second, I'm going to try to stop that background noise. Okay, so what the Rebbe is coming back to is, this is the misunderstanding of thinking of God's speech like human speech, meaning our initial point in the beginning of this chapter, right? We opened up chapter 21 by saying, wait a minute, we said all of creation is speech, and speech doesn't affect the speaker, but we're talking about God, and God's speech isn't like human speech. And we say, how is it different? Because by God, his speech is still one with him, and by us, it's separate. That essence point is where we now came to full circle, both a lot more understanding. That's the mistake of creations of godliness. They know their speech. They know the only fabric of their existence is God, just as speech is formed by the speaker. It's the breath of your mouth. There's nothing outside. But just as by me, my words leave me, these creations think I'm godliness that God formed into this specific entity outside of him. He spoke it. It now exists, separate. That's the mistake. There's nothing separate. But it's speech, but it's God's speech. And by God, his speech never leaves him. Well, it feels like it leaves him. That's because God made you think he's so small so you can exist. But really, he's not small at all. He didn't diminish at all. It's a very interesting concept. He covered himself over and over and over without diminishing himself at all. He made himself really small without getting small at all. I remember a student once, I'm going to remember Sarah's mashal, Sarah's metaphor. A student many years ago gave me a metaphor for this that like blew my mind. I thought it was such a perfect analogy. She said it's sort of like if you're watching a video, let's say on your phone. I don't know if in those days videos were on phones, but whatever. I'll make it a little more modern. She told this to me many years ago. You're watching a video on your phone. This same video could play in a movie theater on a screen that I don't know how big it is. And it could be wraparound sound and the whole theater is full of the sound. And it's this huge screen that's, I don't know how gigantic. And that exact same video is on your phone. Everything's the same. It became small enough to be on your phone, but it didn't lose anything. Every detail is there. It's just shrunk to fit into your phone. So that was her metaphor, which I thought was really good, for God constricting himself, but not losing anything in the process. And therefore, nothing can be outside of him, including these creations that think they're outside of him, like us, because we think God lost something in the process, but he didn't. Now we need to understand this. And what the Rebbe is going to say from here to the end of the chapter, we are almost at the end of the chapter. What the Rebbe says is, what you need to understand is there are two very different realities. There's your reality and there's God's reality. It's like you're looking at the same thing, but from two different ends. Very often in human relationships, we have misunderstandings and miscommunications, right? Because we're talking to someone, but I'm coming from my set of assumptions, the other person's coming from theirs, and we're talking and we totally don't understand each other, right? Happens all the time. We all have many funny or not so funny situations where we just miscommunicated because we're from two very different ends. So the two ultimate different ends are ours and God's. So from our end, creation is speech. And as speech, we're currently separate. And God made himself very small. And he's very covered over. And that's why we're separate from him. And God says, guess what? That's only true from your end. From my end, I didn't get small at all. I didn't change. I just made myself small from your vision. From my vision, I didn't shrink one drop. You're seeing the movie on your phone. Me, I still see it in the theater. No change. So the Rebbe says, but by God's end, ein shum tzimtzum v'hester v'he'elem master umalim lefanav. No constriction conceals for him. For whom does constriction benefit? Me, creation. I think he's covered over. For me, he is covered over. And as such, I can exist. So it's a ploy for me. It has nothing to do for him. As the verse says, from my end, there's something called darkness. There's something called light. Darkness is concealment. Darkness is I can't see. Light is it's all revealed. I see. From God's end, like darkness, like light. Meaning for him, darkness and light is the same. Because it's all him. So there's nothing especially darker or lighter for him. It's all self. But for me, here are parts that God concealed, darkness. Here are parts that God revealed, light. And from his end, it's exactly the same. As the verse says, as is written, Gam choshech lo yachshech mimeka v'gomer. That verse means darkness doesn't darken for you. Gam choshech lo yachshech mimeka. Darkness doesn't darken for you. But if you look at the verse more closely, it means something a little bit different, a little bit deeper. Gam choshech lo yachshech. Darkness doesn't darken because mimeka. Because the darkness is also from you. Darkness can't darken for God because God creates the darkness. I have said this many times. I know it's come up many times, this concept of like in Judaism, in Jewish theology, there's no two forces. In Christianity or any other theology out there, there's the forces of good and the forces of evil and the battle between the two. In Jewish theology, there's nothing battling God because God is all forces of this world. God is the forces of evil. God is the forces of godliness. They're both God. The forces of evil are a tool to help make the forces of godliness better people or stronger or all the other reasons God does it. If you would think in terms of the most horrifically evil human on the planet, whichever person deserves that title, unfortunately, there's a number. It's a manifestation of God's energy. As is explained in Hasidic thought, all the big, evil people of biblical times had more of God's energy. They were so strong in evil. Paro, right? That horrifically evil midget came from such a high source of God's energy. He had to have a lot of power to be that evil, to be that powerfully evil. Lavan, such intense godly energy. Esav, such intense godly energy. You need to have a lot of energy to be an Esav, to be a Lavan, to be a Pharaoh. Godly energy, not energy that's a competition for God. Gam choshech lo yachshech mimeka. The darkness doesn't darken because it's from you. The darkest evil we can think of is all a tool of God's energy. Deliberate design to evoke my service of God. Because as Sarah said, the whole world revolves around me. So all of the evils in the world are to inspire me to be a better person. Are to put pressure on me to cling to God even more, trust God even more, serve God even more. Of themselves, they have no life, no independence. They're a tool of God, right? We had in Chumash recently, the evil Bilam, we can't even fathom a prophet, and so evil said, I can't transgress God's word. I'd love to. I wish I could, but I can't. My mouth can't say anything but what God puts in my mouth. And so true for everything. So for God's end, darkness, light, it's all him. It's different permutations and manifestations of him. For my end, well, this is clearly dark and this is clearly light. And there's truth to that because my perspective sees it and that gives it a validity. But only from human end. From God's end, darkness, light, it's all him. Now to explain more, the Rebbe says, Mishum, how is this that the darkness, which is of course in essence the concealments on God, the constrictions on God, how is it that they don't darken for him? Mishum she'ein hatzimtzumim v'halevushim davar nifrad mimenu. Because all of these constrictions that create darkness, that create concealment of God, they're not separate from him. Chas v'shalom, God forbid. They are him. In other words, the darkness cannot darken for God because it's from him. Since it's him, it can't conceal him. You can't hide yourself from yourself. There's a law. If you've ever seen a religious man who he wants to make a blessing, and maybe he's going to put on his hat. He's making the after blessing, puts on his hat because you're supposed to have a double covering over your head. Or he's not going to put on his hat, he's going to put his sleeve over his head to create a not such great double covering. But he has to take his sleeve and go like this. He can't do it like this. If you ever seen a man doing right, something that he shouldn't be doing anyway, because he should be wearing a hat. Why does he do it like that? Why does he have to go like this? Because you can't cover yourself with your arm. According to Jewish law, you didn't cover yourself with your arm because your arm is you. You can't cover yourself with yourself. So if you put your arm over your head, you did nothing because you can't cover yourself with yourself. That's not a covering. For it to be a covering, it has to be something outside of you. And that's true because it's true for God. So since you can't cover yourself with yourself, all of the coverings on God are self. All of the concealments on God are more self. All of the hidings and veils that God's hiding behind are self. And you can't cover yourself with yourself. So it's a covering for us, not for him. If you think of synagogues, like for those people that have been in 770, that type of synagogue that has glass that officially works one way and not the other. Like from the women's side of the synagogue, you can look down and see. But from the men's side, if you would look up, it will be dark. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about? That's another metaphor to sort of try to wrap your mind around this idea. We're like creation. We're looking up and we see dark wall, nothing behind it. God's on the other side of the barrier. He's looking down and he sees straight through. Or you could think of it like a secret or a mystery. That the secrets, the riddle is unknown to the one you say it to. You know the answer. So for you, it's not a riddle. God knows the truth. So for him, there's no concealment. For us, we're the recipients. For us, it's a riddle. The Rebbe gives a different metaphor to understand this. I'm just trying to give you a lot of different ideas because it's a little counterintuitive. So it's hard to wrap your brain around it sometimes. Ela kadin kamse dilvusheha mine ube. So the Rebbe says, this is like a snail whose garment is part of it. I mean, if you would think of a snail in its shell, snails that have shells, the shell is the body of the snail. So if the snail tucks in its head and it's tight in its shell, you look and you don't see the snail. You just see, I don't know, a little pebble, rock, whatever. But from the snail's end, she didn't change. We could think of it as a turtle. Think of a turtle, and the turtle's under its shell. The turtle can't be seen by the outside world. They just see a shell. But from the turtle's end, the shell is it. So the shell doesn't conceal it from it because it is it. So God is not concealed by constrictions because the constrictions are him. Well, if he's not concealed by his constrictions, what's he constricting himself for? For our end. Because for me, they work. But for him, they don't work at all. And that's why creation didn't change him at all. Because the vehicle of creation is him. In other words, creation is constriction. Constriction is him. Since he's the constriction, he's not constricted by it. As is written, Ki Havaya Hu Elokim. This is a famous phrase, a famous verse that we say many times to express the unity of God. Of course, it's a very famous pasuk, very famous verse from Deuteronomy. Havaya is one term for God. Elokim is another term for God. They're referring, we would say, to two different aspects of God. Havaya is the higher aspect, the beyond nature aspect, the aspect of free-flowing kindness. Elokim is a lower aspect. It's God constricted within nature. It's God within judgments. So two very different things. Havaya, free-flowing kindness. Elokim, judgment. Havaya, beyond nature. Elokim, within nature. Havaya, limitless energy. Elokim, limited energy. Two different aspects of God. All right, that makes sense. But then the verse in Deuteronomy comes along and says, Havaya is Elokim. Meaning, from my end, there's this box called Havaya, that level of God. There's this box called Elokim, a separate, different, smaller level of God. And then the verse says, it's all one. It's all the same. There's no separation. Elokim is God within nature. Havaya is God beyond nature. When I look at nature, I see Elokim. Within the Elokim is Havaya. When I look at nature, I see constriction. And within the constriction is God's limitless energy. There's no difference from God's being between the energy in this piece of paper and the energy in planet Atzilus and the energy beyond any constriction in creation at all. The paper, the highest level of the highest world, and God beyond creation, it's all the same. How could it all be the same? Because if he's the constricting force, he's not constricted by it. That's the essence logic, the essence point that the Rebbe keeps saying in all these different ways. Havaya is Elokim because Elokim is a constricted version of Havaya. But for God, constrictions are irrelevant because he's a constricting force. If he's a constricting force, how could he be constricted by it? So Elokim seems very constricted. Guess what? That's from my end. From his end, it's Havaya. It's beyond constriction. He's the constrictor. He didn't get constricted by himself. It's explained also in other places. This is obviously a very essence concept and explained in Tanya in Shar Hayich B'Emunah at length. V'lachein. Now this is the bottom line of the whole chapter, right? The last 5 words of the chapter. And therefore, kaime kule kilachoshiv mamish. All of existence is like literally nothing to God. We had that same phrase in the first chapter, but we understood it slightly differently there. In the first chapter, we said the basic logic of, again, we're trying to get to the same place, to understand there's nothing but God, all is God. And once we really, really deeply get that, we can apply it to many important other things we're trying to understand. Primarily, how do we access on a daily basis, on a regular basis, this deep love and fear I have for God? That's where we're trying to get to, by the way, remember. So in the previous chapter, I said all is nothing to God, meaning it's so small. Remember? Everything is like nothing to God. Creation didn't change God. Why not? Because it's so small. That was the logic of chapter 20. It's so small. It's only words, and words are 7 steps removed from the speaker. And how can you be affected by something 7 steps removed from you? In essence, what I'm saying is words are really small. Creation is really small. Remember, we said it doesn't really exist. It has to constantly be revivified for it to exist. It's really small. Everything is like nothing for God because it's so small, it doesn't impact him at all. That was absolutely true. And that was chapter 20. Chapter 21, we're not disagreeing with the truth of chapter 20, but we're going deeper. And now we're understanding this much more deeply. And we're saying nothing affects him. Nothing has significance. It's all like nothing to him because it is him. Again, chapter 20 didn't change him at all because it's so small. How could something so small impact him? My speech doesn't even impact me and I'm finite. How could God's speech impact God? He's infinite. In chapter 21, our perspective wasn't because creation's so small. Our perspective was because creation is God. And I think I am formed by God, but separate. But I'm wrong. I'm formed by God. I'm the matter of God. And I'm still the matter of God. And I'm as one with God now as in a human before his words were ever even thought. So it's all literally nothing to God, meaning it's nothing outside of him because it's all him. But to me, it feels different because there's something called constriction. So it's different. Constriction only works for you. Constriction doesn't work for God. How can constriction not work for God? Because he's the constricting force. And you can't constrict yourself from yourself. You can't hide yourself from yourself. So God's constriction only is operative for us. It's not operative for him. So therefore, from my angle, constriction, I'm separate. From God's angle, what constriction are you talking about? You're absolutely one with me. And therefore, everything was me, everything is me, everything will be me. No change. Not because you're so small, because you're me. All right, any questions on this?
I'm just wondering, like, because we're in Yemais Mashiach now, so has the constriction, does it lessen for us? Has it changed? the way that we see the constriction?
I would think so, in that in general, if you look at the Rebbe's approach to things, in there's a very interesting talk of the Rebbe, which is written up in volume 18 of the talks of the Rebbe, Likutei Sichos. I believe it's the third talk on the Torah portion of Balak. And the Rebbe there is discussing a very interesting time, seems like our time, where we're in exile and we're in redemption. This is based on the Haftarah portion, which is discussing a time which the Rebbe proves in the talk is exile and is redemption all at once. So when the Rebbe said this in like the 1960s, it sounded sort of strange, but I mean, it is the reality we've been living since the 1990s, so for the past 30-some years, right? Are we in the days of redemption? Absolutely. How do we know we're in the days of redemption? Because the Rebbe says so. It's okay, so we're in the days of redemption. Are we in exile? Absolutely. We don't need to prove that to ourselves. We don't have to think about Meron and Surfside and Corona, and we're in exile and we're in redemption. So we're in this never land, which is overlapping. If you could think of like math, where you have shared properties, we're in this overlap zone, absolute redemption, absolute exile. That's our times. Very strange. So a person could say, this is all by the way to answer Esther's question. Person can say, okay, so awesome. I'm in redemption and Surfside just happened and they're whatever. I don't want to go into those horrible details. What a redemption. Great. What difference does it make if we're in redemption if this is the life we live? So the Rebbe in that talk explains that the advantage of redemption, oh, my screen is getting dark. That means it is not plugged in. Yes. The advantage of redemption when we're also concurrently in exile is that we have different abilities. The Rebbe in that talk is focusing on the ability to trust God. And because we have the energy of redemption, complete redemption, within complete exile, we have a different ability to relate to God and to trust God than we ever had before the days of redemption. What does it mean to trust God? To trust God basically means to strip away the mirage, to strip away the coverings, to see him, and therefore not be scared, not be intimidated, not be fearful. We see him and we know it's God. In other words, trusting is a very messianic state. Trusting God is really living redemption because it's looking at the world and seeing it all as God. And therefore, you're good because it's all God. So what Esther is saying, she's taking it a step above. She's saying not only seeing it as God, but seeing that it as God is still one with God, because that's what we're talking about here. So I can't say absolutely yes, but I could definitely say yes, we have a greater ability than we ever had before. Because we clearly now have a greater ability to trust God and see in all the concealments, it's God. I'm not full, it's all God. So can we take it the next level and say it's all one with God? Probably better than we ever could before. Even though we're not as holy as the people before us, we're not as wise as the people before us, we're not as refined as the people before us, but we live in different times and therefore we can do things they couldn't. Absolutely, I would say that absolutely. When we come to the ultimate miracle of redemption, so we said today that a great miracle of redemption is that we're going to be able to see God and survive the process. And that is the essence miracle of redemption. And when we see God surviving the process, we means all of creation is going to have this essence shift and intuitively, deeply recognize it is God, which will be a tremendous nullification for every level of creation. It's not separate. There is no separate. It's all from God. Still totally one with him. No outside identity. So it'll be a very humbling experience, a very nullifying experience, except for the Jewish people. Because for the Jewish people, it'll be a very uplifting experience, because our level of being one with God is different than everything else of creation. Because we're from God's inner essence matter. And then we're not just going to intellectually know it, we're going to feel our existence as God's essence put in this body. So it'll be such a sense of like, wow, what I am as a Jew, literally an embodiment of the essence of God. That won't be an intellectual process. It will be an intuitive inner shift from God's revelation of self.
Do you know if the shift is going to be in one instant, or is it?
It seems from the way the Rebbe discusses it, yes. It'll be like a click of creation. But again, it seems that way from how the Rebbe is describing it.
When do we
It doesn't
say,
mean there aren't steps up to that point. Rachel?
when do we say the redemption started?
So the Lubavitcher Rebbe said this in 1991. That's when he first started saying that we're already in the days of redemption. But that doesn't take away the fact that we are not in a mirage. We're in Chicago. So we have both. That's what I'm saying. It's been a confusing past 30 years to know. The Rebbe writes that all of the godliness of redemption is already in this world, and your soul perceives it. So all of our souls see all the godliness of redemption, but my soul's stuck inside of me. And that's the transfer, is for me to get in touch with it, for me to live it. But since 1991 is basically, I would say, the demarcation line where the godliness is here. From a godly spiritual angle, redemption came, but we're human beings. So for us, redemption means we're all in Israel with world peace, with only good for all of mankind on all levels. And that's what we're waiting for. But the spiritual redemption, 1991, it already occurred.
Well, I think the veil is not lifted though. So we have a lot of power, and we could have a lot more faith, and we could see the energy and the shift of the world in many ways, but the veil is not lifted at all. The veil of the world is totally still there. The veil is still there.
But our job is to remove the veil from our eyesight. That's what we have to do.
That's
to
a
get
big
into
job.
that redemptive state
It's a
by
big job.
really immersing ourselves in the words of the Rebbe.
Right.
So for us, I shared, Rachel heard this yesterday, I shared with the class, my last night class, something very beautiful that happened, a little thing. Didn't change anything in my life besides really make me feel like, wow, there's a lot of really good people out there in this world. So I had a piece of mail that was the way it was written on the envelope. It was for the school, the way Bela wrote it. It was a 7, but if you were looking closely, you could think it's a 2. So it went to 6232 North Sacramento. Some very nice gentleman gets it. And he doesn't really notice that it's not written to him. He opens it up and he sees a very big check not written to him. And he realizes, oh, this is not for me. And he looks closely at the envelope and he's like, oh, that's really a 7. Like the postman just, didn't look closely, thought it was a 2. No problem. I'm a nice person. He goes across the street to 6237 and he knocks on the person's door and they say, we don't know what you're talking about. This isn't us. This check is not for us. We don't know what you're talking about. I think most people probably would have stopped at that point. But he looked and he's like, I feel bad. The person that sent this check, obviously it's for somebody. I don't know who they are. What can I do? So he looked at the return address. So Bela had graciously written my address as return address. Okay, just 1 block over, Whipple. I'll go to her house. I have a fence outside. My fence is broken. So semi-broken. So he couldn't figure out how to open it. So he comes to my fence and he can't open it. He can't get in. He's standing. He asked the neighbor. They don't know how to open it. He leaves. All right. good good person, did his thing to the max. It's like, I'm going back. He came back 4 days in a row. He kept thinking, one day I'm going to see someone in the house. On the 4th day, it was Friday and it was cool. So I was going to open my windows. I caught sight. I see this tall black gentleman outside my gate. And he sort of motions to me to come. I'm like, okay, what does he want from me? And he gives me the envelope. He tells me the story. And I could not believe it. I was so affected by seeing what a good person. I'm like, please, please, you have to wait. Because I ran to my house to bring him out a card with the Noahide laws. Because I'm like, this is, I've said, you're already living this, but you know, if you want to find out more about your state, like, please, please, you know, learn these laws. But it to me, it was a moment of like, the veils are shifting. The veils are thinning out. You know, just that, no, the world really is moving, as the Rebbe says, in the direction of goodness and kindness. You can see lots of other things. I'm not saying they're not there, but we have to like celebrate those moments and just say the world is moving. And these lights of goodness and kindness are really where the world is holding. It was very, very, very powerful for me. But I agree with what Firma said. It's very easy for the veils to fall back over our eyes, for us to be blinded because we get stuck by what we see. And we sort of have to go back to the source, to the real truth, which isn't Google, which is Torah, which isn't current events, which isn't what the world says. All that stuff is very blinding, not illuminating at all. We have to go into Torah and then learn it, and then learn it, and then learn it, and then learn it, and let the veils fall away from our eyes. Anyone else? Any other questions? Any other thoughts on this? Very powerful, very philosophical, and very practically relevant. Because the more you integrate this, the calmer and happier and more secure you will feel every single day.
You know how you said we make Hashem small because we're small? Like, well, like there's so many things we don't understand that are happening. Like we can't really even think Hashem is on our terms because it doesn't work. Like it's obvious.
Because it sure doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
That's true. If we need the reminder, you're right.
But I don't really, appreciate it.
But it's true.
Appreciate it.
It's true. God, we don't understand you at all. In case we needed another reminder of how small we are. It's very true.
I don't like giving Paro like all that credit, you know, that he's such a highlight and from such a high source.
It's not, I didn't say it clearly enough. It's not that, oh, Paro was really the good guy in the story. We just, you know, let's do revisionist history here. I'm not saying that at all. Paro was incredibly evil. His energy was the highest source. It's the revelation of the essence of God. From an enormous blinding light of God comes down a powerful energy of evil, comes down an absolutely wicked, evil human called Paro. I was in no way trying to whitewash Paro.
I know that, but I still don't like giving him that either. Like,
but that's the only way he had the power, because the only power is God. If he didn't have, in other words, we know this about Paro, we know this about Laban, we know this about Esau, because they're all biblical figures. To use modern terminology, was Stalin from a very, very high source? I'm positive. How else did he have the ability to murder so many millions of people? And Bin Laden and Hitler and all of the horrible, evil, powerful people of our times, obviously they're from a very high source, because otherwise how would they have the power? The only power is God. So did God make a mistake? No. They're tools he's using very deliberately for a purpose. And that's their function, to be a tool.
okay, we'll go back to the no more constriction and
Okay.
I'm good.
Any other questions? Any other thoughts on any of this?
I like looking for those little examples of seeing the veil being lifted. That's a very positive idea.
It is. And when we have it, celebrate it, treasure it, share it, tell people about it, because we're human, and it's good reassurance. You know, it's good. It's good for us to see that, to see it so carefully. I'm thinking, you know, just seeing the shift of the world. I'll share it with my father's yahrzeit tonight. So my father was a very brilliant man, and graduated with a double major, physics, electrical engineering. And when he went to look for a job in the 60s, nobody would hire him. Nobody would hire an Orthodox Jew with a beard and with a big head covering and with the tzitzits out. He literally couldn't get hired. So out of desperation, he went to work for the government. Out of desperation, because, you know, they pay much less than private. And even when he was hired, the person from Human Resources that interviewed him or that ultimately gave him the job told him straight out, he said, I have to hire you because there are anti-discrimination laws. But I'm just warning you, if you take this job, you will never get promoted. So that was the world in the 1960s, that literally nobody would hire him. And that literally the person that hired him, because he has no choice, it's actually for the United States government that has anti-discrimination laws, told him, but don't worry, we will never ever promote you. You'll be this level worker for the rest of your life. So obviously, you know, God runs the world, and my father gave a lot of charity, and my father rose and rose and rose and rose and was promoted and promoted and promoted. But talking about what Frum is saying, you literally see the shift in the world. I don't know if any of you, if this came across any of your WhatsApps, or if you saw it in the news, that when the new Prime Minister of Israel had his meeting in the Oval Office in Washington with Biden, he came with his chief of staff, who's a woman, who's an Orthodox woman. You can see a truly Orthodox woman. She's dressed completely modestly. She's wearing a wig. And it came out that she's a mother of 12 children. And when Biden heard this, he literally, you can see in the picture, he kneeled to her. That's such a shift. I'm just taking these points. That my father in the 1960s, as an overtly Orthodox Jew, nobody's going to touch him. And if we touch you, we'll never promote you. And today, the president, the leader of the free world, the most powerful country in the world, is literally kneeling before an Orthodox woman because she's overtly Orthodox, because she has 12 children. You know, if you can look at it like that, to that, it's like, wow. The world has truly, 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 truly moved in a direction nobody would have ever believed possible. Anyone want to share anything that they would like to thank God for that happened over this week or before? Anyone has anything they'd like to share?
The whole thing with the building collapse in Florida and everything, the stories about the different people and everything, it's just, I don't know, how can we connect it with Mashiach? You know, it's like 1 second here and the next second, you know, dust. I went to be Nachum by Leah Fool, and, you know, she actually mentioned you to the crowd, what you had told her the day before. About, people's time being up, and, but I don't know, we want to be settled, and we want to believe that everything that Hashem does is ultimately for the good, but I don't know, it ruffles my feathers. It, like, and it makes you, want to figure out like what you could do better. And sometimes it's a hard thing to figure out.
I think it's supposed to do all those things to us. I don't think we're supposed to be settled with it. I don't think we're supposed to say, oh, it's a sign of redemption. I think it's supposed to create enormous, enormous, enormous pain. I think it's doing a very good job of it. I can't, start talking about the pain I feel when I read all those things. It's so, yeah, it's beyond any words. And God did so deliberately. And I think it's supposed to ruffle our feathers very, 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 very much. And it's supposed to make us really, really, really say, this world is not okay. I mean, that's my take on it. I'm giving my take, obviously I don't know God's inner secrets, but my take on it is the redemption angle of it, as I see it, is I'm supposed to walk away and say, this world's not okay. In case for some reason I went through Corona and thought the world was okay, and I went through Black Lives Matter riots and thought the world was okay, and I went through the crazy politics in America, an election year, and thought this was the craziest election year I've ever experienced and thought this world was okay. And I went through Mayron, and I went through Carlin, and I'm going through Surfside. I think at a certain point, I'm going to say, it's not okay. Exile is not
That
okay.
Shaliach who was stabbed up, and there were such graphic pictures that I saw that really, that he came out of the hospital pretty quickly. It's like, your mind is like going and rushing to these things. I personally, I'm so glad on Friday when I turn off my phone, and so sad when I turn it on, again, and
We sometimes have to have the self-control of not looking at certain things because they're not good for us. I was thinking, it's sort of like, I was trying to think of a metaphor for it. And I was thinking maybe it's sort of like, if any of you know a real Zionist who at the moment is living in America, but their whole mind and heart and sense is Israel, and they want to be in Israel, and they're moving to Israel, and it's just like didn't work out yet, but it's going to sure work out any second. So they're in two worlds. They are here, and maybe they have a job here and they have a house here, but they're there and they're doing everything to get there. And I was thinking that's us with redemption. We live here, and we're supposed to live here, and we're supposed to have homes, and we're supposed to build our families and have jobs and have income and have a good physical life. God wants us to have a good life. And we're supposed to feel completely dissatisfied. To the degree, as we know, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, that when we eat, we should say, God, I'm not full because I'm hungry, because this isn't the food I want. I want the Messianic feast. And until I have the Messianic feast, I don't even think I can properly give you an after blessing. How could I say I'm satisfied? I'm not satisfied. It's supposed to affect us that much that we're not satisfied, because this is not good enough. This is not good. This is not right. This is wrong. But how Hashem made us is we get used to things. We adjust, and that's healthy, and that's how we survive. If you would think, God forbid, of people in the Holocaust is an incredibly horrific example of that, how like the Germans took away this, and then this, and then this, and then this, step by step by step, very systematically, because we get used to things. So we get used to quarantines, and we get used to this. We get used to this fear of vaccine or need for vaccine. We get used to like all this stuff that should make us say, we're done. We can't handle this. We need to change this world and bring redemption now. And that's just, I'm not saying this is the ultimate God reason for it. I mean, God obviously has reasons, layers and layers and layers, and for every single person that shouldn't have been there and was, and should have been there and wasn't, and that it affected like this and affected like, every single detail is deliberate design, which we can't fathom. We just say, God, have compassion. This isn't fair. But from ourselves, this to me was the only thing that I could somehow frame this around. we can't feel it's okay. This world is not okay. And therefore we got to push ourselves to bring redemption, because we think we're pushing ourselves, but like it said, it's like, who's going to do it if not us? So don't feel comfortable. We don't feel comfortable. We still feel comfortable. Don't feel comfortable. Don't get bogged down. Demand God. I don't know how, but you got to bring Mashiach. And we've got to do whatever we can to give you that message that you just got to bring Mashiach. This is not acceptable. But that's just my take. I'm not saying that's the take that we're supposed to have, and I'm definitely open to hearing anyone else if they, conceptualize it differently.
I think it's the hard part of living in the state of Gula and Gullus simultaneously, because the power is so extremely intense. So this intense power, and the power that we are feeling, the emotions that we're feeling are so intense on both ways. We're just in a very, very, very intense time, like the point of delivery where the baby has to be pushed out. It's very intense. You can't stop. It's the time that you have to push. And I think when we're in that intense time, we're going to feel a lot of intense feelings, and they're real. And we have to really know that we have power like we've never had before. And in every sense and in every way, whatever we have to do to tap into that power in Kedusha, in a way of bringing light to the world, I think that we just have it. We just have no choice. That's what we have to do. Like when you said in, I don't know, that you kept a journal of gratitudes. So I didn't start keeping a journal of gratitudes and start writing it, but I did, like me and my daughter Chaya, learn every morning, Hayom Yom, and then we do gratitude. So we did 3. So I upped it to 5. So I'm increasing my amount of gratitudes that I'm expressing. And when I came, these are little things like, just like you said, the story of the man that has kindness, and the people that you give Sheva mitzvahs to, and you see how deep and how touched they are and how much they want the world to be good. And the people really do desire that. There's a fire that's out there, and we have to, that's my feeling. I mean, as I was traveling, and trying to figure out what to take and what not to take and how to keep it to my the weight of the luggage and everything, I couldn't leave on my trip without taking a tambourine. I have to have my amuna. I had to have a tambourine with me. I grabbed a dress that was designated for a geula dress. Like I have to be there with the vision that at any moment the veil will be lifted, and every time that we lift the veil in our small way, or we push ourselves in something in addition, that's our responsibility. We can't always wrap our brain around things and understand them and figure them out, because the more we try to figure it out, it will make less sense, and we're too limited. But we do have power to do good, to do kind, to add in that, and to bring our light, and whatever that way that we're bringing light, that's what we're doing. And we're just part of the redemption by holding on to the bitachon, holding on to the emunah, not letting go, and not giving up and not giving in, and just keep increasing with the Rebbe and the learning with the Rebbe's Dvar Malchus, and learning the Rebbe's Sichas, and learning the Torah that bring Geula. His words are bring. That's my feeling, and that's my take on it. That's for whatever that's worth.
Very true. We are super powerful, and we can do the super powerful in very small details. There's the talk of the Rebbe from last week, from Shabbos. The Rebbe said something so powerful. So it's a section of the talk. If someone wants to look it up, it's section 13, I believe, of the talk. And the Rebbe there, the whole talk, the theme of the talk, this thematic is this phrase, make wherever you are Israel. Make wherever you are count. Make wherever you are matter. The Rebbe said basically, and this is, I mean, it's really worth it to learn the whole thing and spend 40 minutes instead of me saying it in 3 minutes, because it sort of loses its power in the 3-minute rendition. But the Rebbe basically says, I'm put in my own words, a lot of us are very dissatisfied. And we think, if only I lived somewhere else, if only I wasn't in Chicago, if only I was California and Israel and Florida, if only I had a different job, if only I had a job and wasn't stuck at home, if only I was home and I have to go to work, if only I was already retired, if only I wasn't retired, if only I was married, if only I wasn't married to this person, if only I had kids, if only my kids were older, if only my kids were younger. We could spend our whole life with a lot of if onlys. And similarly, a person could think it's just mirroring the same theme. Similarly, a person could think it really makes a difference. It makes a difference if I'm good or if I'm not, if I make the blessing, if I forget it, if I give charity, if I don't, if I pray, if I don't. I'm a little piece of this world. What difference does it make? And for sure, redemption, me, I'm going to change the world cosmically, the entire world, me, like. And the Rebbe's answer to all of that is, you are in exactly the right place, doing exactly the right thing, in exactly the right situation for yourself and for the world. And that's what we mean, wherever you are, make it Israel. Meaning, it's not like I should be in a different place and then my life would be good. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. I should be doing something different. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. I should be different time. This is it. The time is now. The Rebbe says all space is contained within all space. So wherever you are, that contains the entire world. All time is contained within all time. So this moment of time contains all time. This moment of space contains all space. And the job you're currently dealing with, what's thrown in your face, this is the last thing left for you to do. Because everything else you did in previous lifetimes. What's left, what's on your plate now, what you're contending with, it's the jobs remaining because we're at the end of the road. So your place is exactly the right place and impacts and contains all places. And your time is the right time and contains all times. And your jobs and struggles and challenges, they're exactly the right ones. They're the ones you have not yet completed. Everything else you did already. And when you are in your place, in your time, in your job, doing your work, you're changing everything. You can literally bring redemption for the entire world because everything is contained within you right now. And it is such an empowering, practical, powerful thought because it's so easy to feel, if only this had worked out differently, if only this had worked out differently, if only this hadn't happened, if only this had happened. And it's like, evil inclination, get out of here. I'm exactly in the right place, doing exactly the right thing. And my little things that I'm doing can literally bring redemption for all mankind. Because each one of us contains the entire world inside of our own small, miniature world of our life. So like Firma was saying, we're so powerful. But when I'm all powerful, but I'm stuck at home taking care of my child. And in that way, you could bring redemption for the whole world. And wherever the situation is, that's exactly how God needs you now. So there's no if onlys, there's no it would have been better otherwise. This is the best. This is God's deliberate design. And when you step up to the plate and make it happen where you are, you're not just validating your life. You can literally bring redemption to the entire world. If anyone wants more details, it's this past week's talk of the Rebbe from 1991, Pinchas, the 13th section of that talk. And it's very relevant because we all get to that if only dissatisfied space. And we just have to say, no, I'm in the right place, dealing with the right things to impact myself and the world. and to be the catalyst for redemption. You know, I'm thinking, talking about the redemption, the right place and the right thing. So my father, as I said, it's his yard site. So he was a scientist, and he was very successful. Thank God. God gave him a lot of scientific success. And a person could say, okay, he's a scientist, you know, whatever, it's nice, you know, well, not the real stuff of the world of serving God. But as a scientist, he really, really, really sanctified God's name within those arenas. And a good friend of his, Professor Brownover said once he was in England, I don't remember, at some university, he was lecturing there. And he heard two university students talking in England, two British students, saying that they hear in America, there's a scientist in the Defense Department who walks around like with a beard and like so obviously Jewish, and he's such a top scientist. And they're like almost sort of saying, could this really, yeah, they heard it. Doesn't make sense, probably not true. And he was behind them, and he shared his eavesdropping and said, it's true, and he's a friend of mine. I know him personally. So every one of us, where we are, we, even if we don't realize it, we know that somebody in England is talking about us, how they heard about it, I don't know. But wherever we are, we do our part, we serve God, and the ripples go wherever they go. And that's, you know, in God's hands, how the world gets affected and changed overtly or covertly by our actions. So thank you so much for joining tonight. Thank you for the Farbrengen. I'll take it in my father's, as an elevation for my father's souls. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. And we shouldn't have
And
to
as Miss Selma have a complete aliyah and the greatest aliyah of Tchis Amesim.
come back.
Amen, amen, amen.
That's it. And
Amen.
sir, we shouldn't have to be ripped to pieces in pain. God shouldn't have to do it anymore. We should move forward, make it happen.
Amen. Amen. Simcha.
Amen.
Only simcha.
To be revealed, only revealed good. We've got to enough of the other stuff. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.